Have you ever noticed how we live in a world that celebrates noise? Group chats that never sleep, news feeds that refresh every second, calendars packed so tightly that silence feels almost suspicious. And yet, in the middle of all this connection, so many of us still whisper the same quiet truth. I feel alone. Loneliness is often painted as something shameful, like a crack in the soul that needs to be filled. But the Buddha offered a different perspective. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. What if solitude isn't a punishment, but an invitation? Not an emptiness to fear, but a space where the deepest joy quietly lives? In this video, we'll explore 7 Buddhist lessons that can transform the way you see being alone. These aren't abstract theories. They're timeless truths woven into everyday life. Lessons about protecting your inner peace, discovering your true self, and finding strength in silence. Think of this as a journey. Each lesson is like a lantern lighting up the path. Along the way, I'll share not just Buddhist wisdom, but also stories, practical practices, and even what modern science says about solitude. By the end, you may discover that being alone isn't about losing something. It's about finding what was always there, yourself. So let's begin this journey together, one lesson at a time. Lesson 1. Choosing silence over meaningless relationships. One of the Buddha's most direct teachings says, "Better to walk alone than with those who pull you away." At first glance, this sounds harsh. After all, aren't relationships the heart of life? We grow up being told that the more friends we have, the more successful, the more loved, the more whole we are. But here's the paradox. Sometimes the crowd around us is the very reason we feel most lonely. Think of it like standing in the middle of a busy party. Laughter everywhere, glasses clinking, conversations flowing. You're smiling, nodding, maybe even laughing yourself. But inside, there's an ache. A sense that none of this noise is truly touching you. That's the reality many of us live with, surrounded, but starved of real connection. The Buddha's wisdom points us towards something countercultural. Solitude can be more nourishing than shallow company. It's like a candle flame in the wind. Surrounded by people who drain us, that flame flickers and dims. But in the stillness of solitude, away from the storm, the flame steadies and grows bright again. Let me give you an example. Sarah, a woman in her late 30s, once told me she felt exhausted after every social gathering. Not because she was shy, but because most conversations revolved around gossip, complaints, and competition. She left dinners feeling heavier than when she arrived. One day she asked herself, "Why am I spending time with people who leave me emptier?" That question changed everything. She started saying no more often. At first it felt selfish, even cold. But in that silence, she began to notice life again. The way the morning light touched her coffee cup. The sound of birds she hadn't heard in years. That's the gift of choosing solitude, clarity. Now, how do we practice this in our own lives? Start small. Take an honest inventory of your relationships. Ask yourself 2 simple questions. Who lifts me up? Who drains me? Write down the answers. You might be surprised at the clarity that comes. Then, experiment with gentle boundaries. Maybe you decline one invitation this week that you know will leave you drained. Use that time instead to do something that nourishes you. Read, walk in nature, or simply sit in silence. Notice how your inner world shifts when you're not constantly battered by noise. Science is beginning to echo what Buddhism has taught for centuries. Psychologists call it social energy. Studies show that spending too much time in negative or meaningless interactions raises cortisol levels, the stress hormone, while mindful solitude actually lowers stress and improves emotional clarity. In other words, being alone can literally heal your nervous system. Your body knows what your spirit craves. Here's a simple exercise you can try tonight. After your day winds down, instead of scrolling through your phone or filling the space with more chatter, sit quietly for 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what do I truly feel right now? Don't judge the answer. Just listen. That act of listening is how the flame steadies. Remember this. Choosing solitude doesn't mean cutting off the world. It means protecting the inner garden of your heart so that when the right people come along, your soil is rich enough to grow something beautiful. So the next time you feel pressured to say yes to company that feels more like noise than nourishment, pause. Ask yourself, am I protecting my peace or am I letting it be drained? Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit quietly with yourself and realize that you are already enough. Lesson 2. Befriending yourself. You are already enough. There's a saying in Buddhism that often gets overlooked. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. At its core, this teaching reminds us that wholeness is not something granted by others, it is something we already carry within. But here's the challenge. Most of us were never taught how to be alone with ourselves. Think about Mark, a man in his 40s. Weekends terrified him. If no plans were on the calendar, panic set in. He'd scroll endlessly, send random "hey, what's up" messages, even agree to things he didn't want to do, just to avoid the quiet. Deep down, being alone made him feel incomplete, like he was missing a piece of himself that only others could provide. One evening, though, plans fell through. Sitting in his quiet apartment, instead of running from the silence, he decided to stay with it. No music, no TV, no distractions. At first it was unbearable. His mind begged for escape. But then something surprising happened. He noticed how tired he felt from constantly pretending to be someone others would like. He realized he didn't even know the sound of his own thoughts without other voices layered on top. That night, for the first time in years, Mark met himself. Buddhism teaches that when you stop searching outside for completion, you begin to see you were whole all along. Mark slowly began treating himself like a friend. He cooked dinner for one, but plated it beautifully, lit a candle and savored it. He walked without his phone, listening instead to the rhythm of his breath. He started journaling, not to impress anyone, but to listen to his own heart. And here's the thing. When you befriend yourself, you stop needing the world's constant approval. You see your strengths without arrogance, your flaws without shame. You become your own safe place. How can you begin this practice? Start by creating a self-date. Choose one simple activity you enjoy. Maybe it's cooking, gardening, or sitting in a park, and do it alone, intentionally. Treat it as if you're spending time with someone you deeply respect. Notice the discomfort at first. That's natural. But underneath, you'll begin to hear a quieter voice, one that's been waiting patiently, your own. Science, too, backs this up. Studies in neuroscience show that solitude activates the default mode network of the brain, the system that helps us process identity, memory, and self-awareness. In other words, time spent alone isn't wasted. It's the very space where your brain integrates who you are. It's where healing and self-recognition happen. Here's a practical reflection exercise. Write a short note to yourself as if you were writing to a beloved friend. Thank yourself for something you've handled well, forgive yourself for a mistake, and encourage yourself in one area you're struggling. This may feel odd at first, but psychologists have found that self-compassion practices reduce anxiety and depression while increasing resilience. It's not indulgence, it's medicine for the heart. So the next time you feel the urge to escape yourself, by overworking, overscrolling, or oversocializing, pause. Ask, what if I chose, just for tonight, to be with myself fully? Cook a meal, light a candle, sit quietly, and listen. You might discover that the companion you've been searching for has been waiting at your own table all along. Because the truth is this: you are not incomplete, you are not broken, you are already enough. And when you finally learn to stand with yourself, you'll find that you are never truly alone again. Lesson 3. Facing the fear of loneliness. Loneliness is not the enemy. There's a certain kind of silence that can feel heavy. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes the night feel too long, the room too big. For many of us, that silence is terrifying. It feels like being trapped with a stranger, ourselves. So we run. We fill the hours with noise, endless scrolling, shallow conversations, anything to avoid that uneasy ache. But Buddhism invites us to look closer. The fear we feel isn't really about loneliness, it's about not knowing ourselves. The Buddha once taught, "It is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles." In other words, the greatest struggle is not with the outside world, but with the inner one. Let me share a story. For years, I avoided evenings alone. I'd rush to make plans or drown myself in distractions. But one night, everything fell through. No phone calls, no invites, no escape. Just me, the ticking of the clock, and my own restless thoughts. At first, panic rose in my chest, but instead of fleeing, I stayed. I let the silence speak. And slowly it began to reveal truths I had buried. Old fears, forgotten dreams, wounds I had ignored. That night, I realized loneliness was not my enemy. It was my teacher. How can you apply this lesson? Start by gently leaning into silence rather than running from it. Tonight, instead of turning on background noise, sit for 10 minutes with nothing but your breath. Notice the discomfort. Notice the thoughts that surface. Don't label them as good or bad. Just listen. The silence may feel loud at first, but over time it becomes space, a place where truth arises. Science supports this too. Researchers studying emotional avoidance have found that constantly distracting ourselves from uncomfortable feelings only strengthens them. By contrast, mindfulness practices, sitting quietly, observing thoughts without judgment, actually calm the amygdala, the brain's fear center. In short, facing discomfort shrinks it, while running from it makes it grow. Here's another practice. Write down the fears that arise when you're alone. Then, next to each one, write the deeper truth it might be pointing to. For example, I'm afraid no one will love me. Maybe I need to learn to love myself first. This exercise transforms fear into guidance. Remember, loneliness is not a void, it's an invitation. When you accept it, it becomes a doorway, leading you deeper into the rooms of your own soul. And here's the paradox. Once you make peace with solitude, you also make peace with others. You no longer cling to people out of fear. You choose them out of love. So the next time that heavy silence comes, don't run. Sit with it. Let it stretch. Listen. Because sometimes what we fear most is not loneliness itself, but the truth waiting quietly within it. And once you face that truth, you'll never see being alone the same way again. Lesson 4. The power of inner independence. The greatest refuge is in yourself. At some point in life, we all realize a hard truth. No one else can live our lives for us. Friends can comfort us. Family can support us. Partners can walk beside us. But in the deepest sense, we must learn to stand on our own feet. The Buddha once taught, "Be a lamp unto yourself, be a refuge unto yourself." It is a call to independence, not the cold, isolating kind, but the strong, steady kind that grows from within. I remember a simple moment that revealed this lesson to me. One afternoon, I was staring at a sink full of dishes, feeling weighed down by problems. My first thought was, I wish someone would just tell me what to do. But no one did. The only voice left was my own. And that's when I understood, if I wanted change, I had to start building it, brick by brick, choice by choice. Independence is not about shutting people out. It's about no longer handing over your peace as if someone else were responsible for it. Think of it like learning to walk. At first you need support, a steady hand to guide you. But eventually you must trust your own legs. Otherwise, you never discover the strength already within. How can you begin to cultivate this inner independence? Start small. Instead of asking others what decision you should make, try listening to your own instincts first. Instead of waiting for approval, act on what feels aligned with your values. Keep a decision journal. When you make a choice on your own, write it down. Later, reflect on the outcome. You'll begin to see that even mistakes are teachers, and that you are far more capable than you imagined. Science validates this too. Psychologists call it self-efficacy, the belief in your own ability to handle challenges. Research shows that people with higher self-efficacy experience lower stress and greater resilience. Each time you face a difficulty without leaning too heavily on others, you strengthen this inner muscle. Here's a practical exercise. Once a week, deliberately handle a small problem on your own. Fix something at home, cook a new recipe without help, or resolve a conflict calmly without asking for external validation. These micro moments build confidence. Over time, they add up to a deep trust in yourself. And here's the paradox. The more independent you are inside, the more freely you can love others. You no longer cling out of fear or demand they complete you. Instead, relationships become a choice, not a necessity. You connect not from emptiness, but from fullness. So, the next time you find yourself thinking, I can't do this without someone else, pause. Remind yourself, the greatest refuge is in myself. Because when you plant your feet firmly in your own strength, storms may come, but you will still remain. Lesson 5. Solitude as a true mirror. Solitude is a mirror. When most people think of solitude, they imagine emptiness, a blank space that feels lifeless. But in Buddhism, solitude is not a void, it is a mirror. It reflects back what we often avoid seeing, our true desires, our hidden fears, and the values that matter most. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." And solitude is the doorway to that inner peace. I remember a weekend when everyone I knew was busy. My old habit would have been to rush into distraction, scrolling, calling, watching something to fill the silence. But that time, I didn't. I simply sat alone. At first it felt awkward, like sitting with a stranger, but as the hours passed, I began to notice questions rising that I had never really faced. What do I actually want? Not what my friends expect, not what my family hopes for, but me? That simple question was both unsettling and liberating. Think of solitude like wiping a foggy mirror. Most of the time, our lives are clouded with the voices of others, expectations, comparisons, obligations. But when you step into solitude, the fog begins to clear, and suddenly your own reflection comes into focus. How can you practice this? Start with intentional quiet time. It doesn't need to be long. Even 15 minutes a day without external input can shift your perspective. Turn off your phone, close the door, and simply sit with yourself. If thoughts come, write them down. Don't judge them. Just notice. Over time, patterns emerge, clues to what your heart has been whispering all along. Science also backs this up. Neuroscience research shows that in moments of solitude, the brain's default mode network becomes active, the system tied to self-reflection, creativity, and meaning-making. That's why so many people have their deepest insights not in noise but in quiet, while walking alone, journaling, or simply sitting in silence. Here's a simple exercise. Try a solitude question. Once a week, sit in stillness and ask yourself one open question like, what truly gives me joy? Or, what kind of person do I want to become? Write down the first thoughts that arise. You may be surprised at the clarity that surfaces when no one else's voice is present. The truth is, solitude is not about being cut off from others. It's about meeting yourself honestly, without masks. And when you know yourself more deeply, you show up differently in the world. You choose work that aligns with your soul, not just your resume. You spend time with people who nourish you, not just those who demand from you. So, the next time you find yourself alone, resist the urge to fill the silence. Instead, let it be a mirror. Look into it. Ask the questions you've been avoiding. Because in that reflection, you may discover not emptiness, but the truest version of yourself. Lesson 6. Honoring your uniqueness and personal worth. Your uniqueness is your strength. We live in a culture that often tells us to blend in. Wear what's trending. Think like everyone else. Follow the script. At first, this feels safe. Acceptance seems guaranteed when you don't stand out. But Buddhism teaches us something radically different. Comparison steals our joy while authenticity sets us free. The Buddha reminded his disciples, comparison is the thief of joy. I remember a time when I tried to fit every mold around me. I chose the same career path my friends admired, copied their weekend routines, even forced myself into conversations that didn't reflect my values. On the outside, I looked like I belonged. On the inside, I felt hollow, like I was living someone else's story. Then one day, I caught my reflection in a store window. It wasn't my face that startled me. It was the realization that I had been wearing a mask for years, a mask of who I thought I should be. That moment became a turning point. I could either keep pretending or I could start honoring the unique self I had buried beneath expectations. Here's the paradox. The very things you think make you different are often the things that hold your greatest strength. Maybe you're quieter than most, but that makes you a deep listener. Maybe you see the world in metaphors, while others focus only on facts. That imagination is a gift. In solitude, you have space to see these qualities clearly, without the pressure of comparison. How can you practice this? Begin with acceptance. Each day, write down one quality of yourself that feels different from others. Instead of labeling it as a flaw, ask, how might this be a strength? Over time, you'll begin to reframe your uniqueness, not as something to hide, but something to lean into. Science supports this shift. Research on self-acceptance shows that people who embrace their individuality experience higher levels of well-being and resilience. Psychologists explain that when we suppress parts of ourselves to fit in, it increases stress and decreases authenticity in relationships. But when we accept ourselves deeply, we naturally build compassion for ourselves and for others. Here's a practical exercise. Next time you're in a group, instead of trying to match the energy or opinions around you, practice standing in your truth. Say what you genuinely think, or simply stay quiet if that feels right. Notice how liberating it feels to act from authenticity rather than performance. Remember, every person you truly admire was different. They spoke with their own voice, walked their own path, and lived their truth unapologetically. Why should it be any different for you? So the next time you feel the urge to hide behind a mask, pause, breathe. Remind yourself, my uniqueness is not a weakness. It is my landmark. It guides me home. Because the world doesn't need another copy. It needs the one and only you. Lesson 7. Alone time for restoring energy. Solitude restores the soul. For years, I believed being busy meant being alive. Every hour scheduled, every minute filled. If I slowed down, I feared I'd fall behind. But eventually my body knew what my mind refused to admit. This pace wasn't sustainable. One evening, staring at the glow of my computer screen, I felt an emptiness that wasn't sadness exactly. It was exhaustion of the soul. The Buddha once taught, peace is not found by adding more, but by removing what is unnecessary. Solitude does exactly that. It clears the clutter, restores the spirit, and reminds us of what truly matters. Think of it like sleep. Just as your body needs rest each night, your mind needs moments of stillness to reset. Without them, even small problems feel overwhelming, but when you step into solitude, the mind breathes again. Energy returns, not the jittery rush of caffeine, but a steady current, like a river flowing calmly after the storm. I once spoke with a woman named Linda who spent decades chasing productivity. She thought rest was laziness, so she filled every moment with tasks. But eventually, her health collapsed. Burnout, insomnia, constant anxiety. Her recovery began not with medication, but with permission to rest. She started with short walks alone, no phone, just breathing. She began sitting by her window each morning, simply watching the light change. Over time, her energy returned, not because she worked harder, but because she worked wiser, honoring her need for solitude. How can you bring this into your life? Start with small rituals of quiet. Take a 5-minute walk without devices. Sip tea without multitasking. Sit in the car for a moment before rushing into your next obligation. Let those minutes be sacred. Notice how even tiny pauses create space for your nervous system to reset. Science confirms this. Studies on attention restoration theory show that solitude, especially in nature, replenishes cognitive resources, lowers stress hormones, and improves emotional regulation. That's why after a simple walk in the park, life feels lighter and problems seem less heavy. Here's a simple practice. Choose one daily ritual and slow it down. Maybe it's making coffee, folding laundry, or washing dishes. Do it mindfully without rushing, as if it were the only task in the world. Let the simplicity itself restore you. Remember this: solitude is not about avoiding life. It's about returning to it with a full heart instead of a drained one. Every interaction, every decision, every act of love flows from the state of your inner world. If your well is empty, you have nothing to give. But when you allow solitude to refill you, your presence becomes a gift. So the next time you feel worn down, ask yourself, when was the last time I allowed myself a true pause? Because solitude isn't wasted time. It is the most generous gift you can give yourself and the people who love you. Lesson 8. Silence leads to deep wisdom. Wisdom arises in stillness. There was a time when my mind felt like a crowded marketplace. Thoughts rushing, worries shouting, memories clashing, and what-ifs echoing endlessly. From the outside, I looked calm enough, but inside it was chaos. Every decision I made came from that noise. Then one day, a friend invited me to sit in silence for just 10 minutes. At first I laughed. How could 10 minutes make a difference? But I agreed. The first few minutes were unbearable. My thoughts didn't stop. They grew louder, like waves crashing one after another. I wanted to escape, to check my phone, to do anything but sit there. And yet, something subtle shifted. My breathing slowed. The noise softened. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in thoughts. I was watching them. Buddhism teaches that wisdom isn't something we chase. It emerges when the mind becomes still enough to see clearly. The Buddha said, "In the stillness of the mind, truth reveals itself." Wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers, but we can only hear it in silence. How do we practice this? Begin with micro moments of stillness. Instead of filling every spare minute with distraction, pause, sit quietly with your breath. Even 2 minutes of stillness can shift the quality of your day. Treat silence not as an empty space to be filled, but as fertile ground where clarity grows. Modern science agrees. Neuroscientists studying meditation have found that silence and mindful breathing reduce activity in the brain's default mode network, the system linked to overthinking and self-criticism. When this network quiets, the brain becomes more efficient at problem-solving and creative insight. In other words, silence literally rewires the mind for wisdom. Here's a practice. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and simply follow your breath. When thoughts come, don't push them away. Just notice them, then return to the breath. At the end, write down one thing you saw more clearly. Over time, you'll realize that silence is not empty. It is full of answers waiting to be heard. Think of it like a snow globe. When it's shaken, everything swirls chaotically and nothing is clear. But set it down, let it rest, and slowly the snow settles. The scene inside becomes visible. Our minds are the same. Stillness allows the truth that was always there to come into view. So the next time you find yourself overwhelmed, don't rush to add more noise. Instead, pause, breathe, step into silence. Because in that silence, wisdom is already waiting for you. Lesson 9. The complete joy of returning to yourself. Solitude is not emptiness. It is home. So many people fear solitude because they mistake it for abandonment. They imagine an empty room, a silent phone, a life without warmth. But Buddhism flips the perspective. Solitude is not emptiness. It is the space where you come home to yourself. The Buddha once said, "You yourself must strive. The Buddhas only point the way." In other words, no one else can walk your path for you. And that's not a burden. It's your greatest freedom. Think of solitude as a sanctuary. Not a prison cell, but a sacred space where you can breathe, reflect, and remember who you truly are. Imagine a small garden inside you. When neglected, it grows wild with weeds, expectations, comparisons, constant noise. But in solitude, you finally tend that soil. You pull out what doesn't belong, you water what gives life, and slowly the garden blooms again. I once spoke with a man named James, who after a painful divorce dreaded being alone. The silence of his apartment felt unbearable. So he filled it with TV, endless outings, anything to avoid the ache. But one day, he decided to stop running. He turned everything off and simply sat. The first days were hard. His fears echoed loudly. But little by little, the silence softened. He began journaling, cooking simple meals, walking in the park by himself. Within months, he said, "I stopped fearing the silence. It became the safest place I know." How do you cultivate this same shift? Start by reframing solitude. Instead of asking, "Why am I alone?" ask, "What can I discover here?" Each quiet moment is an invitation to check in with yourself. What are you feeling? What do you need? What truth is rising? Treat solitude as a daily practice, not an accident. Science supports this reframe. Studies in positive psychology show that people who practice mindful solitude experience higher life satisfaction and stronger emotional stability. Their happiness no longer depends on external validation, it flows from within. Solitude, when embraced, rewires the brain toward resilience and inner peace. Here's a practice. Create a sanctuary ritual. Choose one quiet activity that makes you feel at home. Maybe it's lighting a candle, meditating, or simply sitting with a cup of tea. Do it consistently in the same place as a reminder that solitude is not emptiness. It is your inner home. Remember, solitude is not about rejecting people. It's about learning to carry your own wholeness, so that when you do connect with others, it's from a place of overflow, not desperation. Relationships stop being about filling a void and start being about sharing your abundance. So the next time life hands you a quiet moment, don't rush to fill it. Let it stretch, sit in it, breathe, because in that silence you may realize something beautiful. You were never missing anything. You were already whole. And solitude is simply the space where that truth becomes clear. The journey to finding joy in solitude. We began this journey with a paradox. How can someone be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone? The Buddha's answer is timeless. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Over the past 9 lessons, we've seen how solitude, often feared, can become one of life's greatest gifts. First, we learn to choose solitude over meaningless connections, understanding that not every crowd nourishes us, and sometimes walking alone is the bravest choice. Then we saw the importance of befriending ourselves, discovering that we are already enough. Loneliness becomes lighter when we treat ourselves with the same kindness we offer to others. We face the reality that the fear of being alone is really the fear of meeting ourselves. Instead of running from that silence, we can embrace it, allowing it to reveal forgotten dreams and unspoken truths. From there, we explored the power of inner independence, realizing that no one else can live our lives for us, and that strength grows each time we trust our own voice. Solitude also became a mirror, reflecting back what truly matters. In its quiet clarity, we see our values, passions, and hidden wisdom. We learn to honor our uniqueness, setting down the masks of conformity and standing more freely in our truth. And because life is demanding, solitude reminded us to restore our energy. Like rest for the soul, it clears away the clutter and brings us back to life with a full heart instead of an empty tank. Silence, we discovered, is not absence. It is the soil where deep wisdom grows, guiding us to decisions made with clarity and compassion. Finally, we reframed solitude not as emptiness, but as home. A safe sanctuary within ourselves where we can always return no matter what storms rage outside. So, what does all this mean? It means solitude is not the enemy, it is the teacher. Not a prison, but a doorway. When welcomed, it becomes joy. When honored, it becomes strength. And when practiced, it transforms the way we see ourselves and the people around us. If there's one message to carry with you, it's this. You are not incomplete. You are not broken. Solitude is not about losing. It's about finding what has always been within you. In the end, solitude is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. It's the gentle reminder that you were whole all along, and that the quiet within you holds a joy no one can take away. So the next time life gives you a moment of silence, don't rush to fill it. Sit with it. Listen. If today's message touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. How has solitude shaped your life? And if you know someone who needs this reminder, share the video with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom each week.